The champagne cork popped like a gunshot, and my mother's laughter cut through the crystal chandeliers of Sterling Heights Steakhouse, my restaurant, the one they didn't know I owned. Jasmine, sweetie. Mom's voice dripped with mock sympathy as 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me in my server's uniform. Since you're already here working, why don't you make yourself useful and serve our table? My father, Richard Monroe, real estate mogul, country club president, didn't even look up from his whiskey. It's what she does, Patricia. Let her earn her keep tonight. At least she's employed. My younger sister Natalie sat at the head table in her pearl-white wedding gown, her smile faltering for just a second before she recovered. She'd chosen this venue. She knew I worked here. This wasn't an accident. The reception fell silent. Cousins, aunts, Uncle Paul from Connecticut, Natalie's new in-laws, everyone watching to see if I'd crumble. I'd spent 28 years disappointing the Monroe family. Tonight was supposed to be my sister's moment of glory, and somehow, they'd turned it into my public execution. I picked up my serving tray with hands that refused to shake. If you're loving this already, smash that subscribe button for Formidable Revenge channel. Hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and share this because what happens next will blow your mind. Trust me, you won't see this coming. My GM, Thomas, watched from across the room, his expression tight with concern. He was one of 3 people who knew the truth. The others were my accountant and my lawyer. Nobody else. Not my family, not my friends. Not the staff who'd worked alongside me for 3 years while I built this empire from nothing. Then the door opened and Cameron Mitchell walked in. Cameron Mitchell, billionaire tech CEO, venture capitalist, the man whose investment firm had just been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine. The same Cameron Mitchell who sat on my board of directors. The same Cameron who'd begged me to let him invest in my restaurant chain expansion. His eyes locked onto me standing there in my black uniform, holding a tray of champagne flutes, surrounded by my smirking family. His face went white as marble. Madame President, he breathed, his voice carrying across the silent room. What the hell are you doing? The champagne glass slipped from my mother's fingers, shattering against imported Italian tile. My father's face drained of color. Natalie looked like she might faint right there in her $5,000 dress, and I smiled. Finally, after 28 years of being invisible, I was about to become unforgettable. This is the story of how my family tried to humiliate me at my sister's wedding, and accidentally expose the secret that would destroy every lie they'd ever told about me. By the end of this night, they'd wish they'd just let me serve the damn food. My name is Jasmine Monroe, and I learned early that in my family, success wasn't about what you achieved, it was about what you could display. My parents didn't care if you were happy, fulfilled, or even good at what you did. They cared if you could brag about it at dinner parties. Sterling Heights wasn't just any restaurant. It was the crown jewel of Chicago's dining scene, where reservations required 3 months' notice and politicians brought foreign dignitaries. What started as a single steakhouse had become an empire, 4 locations across the Midwest, a 5th breaking ground in Manhattan, and a 6th planned for Los Angeles. I'd built it all. Every exposed brick wall, every leather booth, every signature dry-aged ribeye. I'd worked 80-hour weeks, slept on office couches, learned butchery from masters, studied supply chains until my eyes bled. At 28, I owned something worth $43 million, and my parents thought I was a failure. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago. Natalie's wedding, reception to follow at Sterling Heights Steakhouse, 7 o'clock sharp. I'd stared at that cream cardstock for 20 minutes, feeling something cold settle in my chest. They knew I worked here. I'd mentioned it once 2 years back, during one of our quarterly obligatory dinners. Dad had laughed. that particular bark he reserved for things beneath his contempt. Waitressing? Well, at least it's honest work, I suppose. Mom had patted my hand with fingers heavy with diamonds. It's respectable, dear. Service industry jobs are very important. The subtext screamed louder than words. You're 26, a college dropout, and slinging steaks. Meanwhile, your sister has a master's degree and works for a Fortune 500 company. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was why I'd left Northwestern at 19. They didn't know about Grandma Rose's stroke, about the months I'd spent in her Chicago apartment, helping her relearn how to speak, how to walk, how to remember her own daughter's name. They didn't know I'd used my college fund to pay for her private care when insurance ran out. They just knew I'd quit. And to Richard and Patricia Monroe, quitting meant failure. Period. End of story. Natalie was different. Perfect grades, perfect sorority, perfect corporate job at a consulting firm downtown. She'd never challenged them, never questioned their values, never embarrassed them in front of their book club friends. She was the daughter they could show off. I was the one they explained away. Oh, Jasmine? She's finding herself. You know how creative types are. Creative type. Code for disappointing. Sterling Heights had been my rebellion, my proof, my middle finger to every lowered expectation. I'd started with Grandma Rose's life insurance money, $50,000 she'd left specifically to me, with a note that said, "Build something beautiful." I'd worked as a line cook, then sous chef, saved every penny, studied every successful restaurateur's playbook. When I finally opened Sterling Heights at 25, I'd kept my name off everything. No press releases, no grand announcements, just silent ownership buried in LLC paperwork. I wanted to build something real before anyone could tear it down with their opinions. 3 years later, I had 4 restaurants, 72 employees, and a waiting list that stretched into next year. And my family still thought I was just serving tables, living paycheck to paycheck in some studio apartment, too proud to admit I needed help. The truth? I owned a penthouse in Lincoln Park, but they'd never asked where I lived. The special request came through Thomas 2 weeks before the wedding. I was in my office reviewing the new Manhattan lease when he knocked, his expression careful in that way that meant bad news. "The Monroe party called," he said slowly. "They have a specific request for the wedding reception." My stomach dropped. "What kind of request?" Thomas shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "They want you specifically assigned to their family table, in uniform. They said," and I'm quoting here, "Our daughter knows one of your servers personally, and we'd like her to feel included in the celebration." The words landed like physical blows. Included. They wanted me in uniform, serving them drinks, clearing their plates, playing the role they'd already cast me in. Not as family, as staff, as proof of what I'd become in their eyes, someone who served people like them. I should have refused. Should have told Thomas to cancel their reservation, to call my mother and explain that Sterling Heights was suddenly unavailable. I could have done it. I owned the place. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'll do it." Thomas's eyes widened. "Jasmine, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. But I'm going to." He studied me for a long moment, trying to understand. "Why?" Good question. Why would I willingly walk into my own humiliation? Why would I put on that uniform and let them parade me around as proof of my failure? Because I needed to know something. I needed to know if I could stand in front of them, knowing exactly who I was, and not need them to know it too. My whole life had been shaped by their disappointment. Every choice I'd made, even the successful ones, had been colored by their judgment. Maybe it was time to find out if I could exist in their contempt and still be whole. "Okay," Thomas said finally, "but we're doing this my way. You work the wedding, but I'm calling in the full senior staff. Marcus on the floor, Elena on wine service, the whole A-team. If this goes sideways, I want people who have your back. The night of the wedding, I dressed carefully in my server's uniform, black slacks, white button-down, black tie, sterling heights embroidered over my heart. I looked at myself in the staff bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calm, composed, like she had nothing to prove. I didn't know yet how wrong that was. Didn't know that Cameron Mitchell had decided to fly in early from San Francisco to surprise me. Didn't know that my carefully constructed secret was about to detonate in the middle of my sister's wedding reception. Didn't know that in less than 3 hours my entire family would be staring at me like I was a stranger. All I knew was that when I walked into that reception hall and saw my mother's smile, sharp and satisfied, I felt something cold and clear settle over me. Let them have their show. Let them have their moment of superiority. I'd built an empire in silence. Let's see what happened when the silence broke. The ceremony was beautiful. I stood in the back of the ballroom, watching Natalie marry Trevor, a hedge fund analyst with perfect teeth and a family that made the Monroes look middle class. Everything was ivory and gold and dripping with old money. Mom kept glancing back at me, making sure I saw her see me, making sure I understood my place. The reception started at 7. I worked the room with my tray, refilling water glasses, delivering appetizers, playing invisible. Marcus worked the other side. Elena handled the wine, and Thomas oversaw everything from his position near the kitchen. "Jasmine!" My Aunt Carol grabbed my arm as I passed. She was already 3 glasses deep into the open bar. "Sweetheart, I didn't know you worked here. How wonderful that you could be part of Natalie's special day." The subtext: "How sad that you're working while your sister celebrates." "It's a beautiful venue," I said neutrally. "Oh, it is. Your parents must be so proud of Natalie. Yale MBA, corporate job, now married to Trevor Mitchell. No relation to the Tech Mitchells, unfortunately, but still, very successful family." She didn't ask about me. Nobody did. They saw the uniform and made their assumptions, and that was enough. By 8 o'clock, the room was buzzing with champagne and laughter. I delivered the first course to my parents' table: my father, my mother, Uncle Paul, Aunt Helen, and assorted cousins I barely knew. "Thank you, Jasmine," Mom said, her voice carrying to nearby tables. "It's so nice having someone we know handling our table. Such a personal touch." Dad raised his whiskey. "At least she's employed. That's something." Laughter rippled around the table. Not cruel exactly, just dismissive, the kind of laughter that said, "We're better than this, but we're being gracious about it." I kept my face neutral and moved to the next table, but inside, something was building. Not anger, something colder. Like watching a fuse burn down toward dynamite and knowing you're the one who lit it. At 8:30, I was clearing the salad course when my mother called me over again. She was holding court, surrounded by her book club friends, all of them draped in designer labels and judgment. "Ladies, this is my oldest daughter, Jasmine. She works here." Not, "This is Jasmine. She owns this restaurant." Not, "This is Jasmine. She's built something incredible." Just, "She works here." One of the women, Diane something, lawyer's wife, smiled with practiced sympathy. "How nice. Service industry jobs are so important. Someone has to do them." Another woman, younger, with a face tight from recent work. "Do you enjoy it? The restaurant business?" I could have told them the truth right then. Could have ended it. But something held me back. Maybe I wanted to see how far they'd go. Maybe I needed to feel the full weight of their contempt before I shattered it. "It has its moments," I said simply. Mom laughed, and it was a sound like breaking glass. "Jasmine's always been our free spirit. Not everyone is cut out for traditional success." Traditional success. She was sitting in my $43 million restaurant, eating food I'd curated, drinking wine I'd selected, surrounded by ambiance I'd designed, and she was telling me about traditional success. I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. Thomas caught my eye from across the room. He mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure. The fuse was still burning, and I had no idea what would happen when it reached the end. Then, at 9:15, the main door opened and Cameron Mitchell walked in. Don't click away. Hit that like button because the explosion is coming and you need to see this. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Cameron Mitchell stood in the doorway of Sterling Heights like he'd walked into the wrong movie. 6'3", Tom Ford suit. The kind of presence that made people straighten their spines and check their phones to see if they'd missed something important. He'd texted me earlier that day. Flying back to Chicago tonight. Dinner tomorrow to discuss the NYC expansion? I'd replied, can't tomorrow. Family thing. He'd sent back a thumbs up. I'd assumed that was the end of it. I'd assumed wrong. His eyes scanned the reception hall, clearly looking for someone, probably me, to surprise me, maybe thinking this was the family thing I'd mentioned. Then his gaze locked onto me standing at my parents' table in my server's uniform, holding a tray of dirty plates, while my mother gestured at me like I was part of the evening's entertainment. I watched Cameron's face change. Confusion, then recognition, then something like horror. He started walking toward me, his stride eating up the distance between the door and my family's table. The crowd parted without realizing why. People always moved for Cameron Mitchell. "Madame President," he said, and his voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom. "What the hell are you doing?" The room stopped breathing. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. The crystal exploded against the floor, amber liquid spreading across ivory tile like a blood stain. My father's face drained of color so fast I thought he might pass out. Natalie froze mid-laugh, her hand locked around Trevor's arm. Cameron looked around at my family, then back at me, his expression shifting from horror to fury. "Did you—" He stopped himself, visibly controlling his temper. "Are you working? Here? At your own restaurant?" Uncle Paul made a sound like a strangled cat. "Her restaurant?" Cameron blinked. "You didn't tell them." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief, maybe mixed with admiration. He'd known I kept my ownership quiet, but he'd assumed my family at least knew. "Tell us what?" My mother's voice was brittle, sharp enough to draw blood. "Jasmine, what is he talking about?" I set down the tray carefully. 30 years of their expectations, their disappointments, their casual cruelty. It all came down to this moment. I could have stayed quiet. Could have laughed it off as a misunderstanding. Could have protected them from the truth. Instead, I looked my mother directly in the eyes and said, "Sterling Heights is mine. All of it. I own it." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen exhaust fans humming 3 rooms away. My father found his voice first. "That's impossible. You're a waitress. You dropped out of college. You can't possibly—" "4 locations," Cameron interrupted, his voice hard. "Chicago, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Columbus, 5th opening in Manhattan next spring. Jasmine's restaurant group did $43 million in revenue last year. She's one of the most successful restaurateurs under 30 in the Midwest." He paused. "And you had her serving drinks at a family wedding." Natalie made a sound like she'd been punched. "You own this place?" "I built this place." My voice was steady, clear. From nothing. I used Grandma Rose's life insurance money to start, worked as a line cook for 2 years, saved every dollar, took out loans I'm still paying off. 3 years ago, I opened the first Sterling Heights. Last year, we expanded to 4 cities. Next year, we're going national. Mom was shaking her head, her perfectly styled hair not moving an inch. No, no, you work here. You said you work here. I do work here. I work 80 hours a week. I just own it too. Aunt Helen leaned forward, her voice shrill. But you never told anyone. You let us all think you were just... Just what? I cut her off. Just a server? Just a dropout? Just a disappointment? The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. If you owned this restaurant, you would have told us. You would have... Would have what, Dad? Invited you to the opening? Asked for your approval? Given you a chance to take credit for something you had nothing to do with? His face flushed red. You're lying. This is some kind of sick joke. Cameron pulled out his phone. I can show you the LLC paperwork right now. I'm on her board. I've been trying to invest more capital in her expansion for 6 months, but she keeps turning me down because she wants to maintain majority ownership. He looked at my family with something like contempt. She's the real deal. She's brilliant. And you had her cleaning your table. The reception dissolved into chaos. My mother was crying, actual tears cutting through her flawless makeup. My father stood frozen, his whiskey glass clutched in his hand like a weapon. Natalie had gone pale as her wedding dress, and Trevor kept looking between me and his new wife like he'd married into the wrong family. Guests were pulling out phones, Googling Sterling Heights ownership, whispering behind hands. The wedding photographer had stopped taking pictures. The band had stopped playing. 100 people watching the Monroe family implode in real time. Jasmine, my mother gasped, why would you keep this from us? Before I could answer, my father cut in, his voice sharp with something that sounded like betrayal. You let us think you were struggling. You let us worry about you. Think you needed help. Think you were wasting your life. You never worried, I said quietly. You judged. There's a difference. Natalie stood suddenly, her chair toppling backward. I chose this venue because I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought I was throwing you a bone. I thought I was being nice, letting you work my wedding, letting you be part of something special since your life was so pathetic. The words hit like bullets. I'd known my family looked down on me, but hearing Natalie say it out loud, hearing that her wedding venue choice had been an act of charity, it was worse than anything I'd imagined. Natalie, Trevor said quietly, touching her arm. She shook him off. No, she let me think. She let all of us think. Natalie's voice rose, shrill and cracking. Do you know how humiliating this is? I just got married in my sister's restaurant thinking I was supporting her sad little career. And it turns out she's richer than all of us combined. Uncle Paul stood. This is unacceptable. You made fools of us. I didn't make you anything, I said, and my voice was shaking now. I just didn't correct your assumptions. Mom was full-on sobbing now, mascara tracking down her face. How could you do this? How could you let us... She couldn't finish, just stood there, shaking, looking at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into her life wearing her daughter's face. And Dad looked broken, not angry anymore, just lost. All those dinners, he said softly, all those times we tried to help you, give you advice, offer you connections. You never offered help, I said. You offered judgment, every single time. Cameron cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the family implosion he'd triggered. I should go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... Stay. My mother's voice was ice. I want to know everything. How much is this business worth? How much is my daughter worth? Since apparently she couldn't be bothered to tell her own family. Cameron looked at me for permission. I nodded, numb. The Sterling Heights Restaurant Group is currently valued at $43 million. Jasmine owns 82%. She's personally worth approximately $35 million, not including her property holdings or investment portfolio. The number landed like a bomb. Mom actually swayed on her feet. Dad set down his glass before he dropped it. $35 million, more than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. More than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. And I'd built it in 3 years while they'd laughed at me for being a dropout. Natalie let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. I got married in my little sister's restaurant. My wedding. My perfect wedding. She looked around at the guests, at the ivory flowers and gold accents and expensive food. All of this is hers. I didn't choose a venue. I chose my sister's property. Nat, I started. Don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. The reception was ruined. Guests were gathering their things, whispering, some looking sympathetic, others looking like they'd just witnessed the social event of the season. My family stood in the wreckage of their assumptions, and I stood in the wreckage of any hope for reconciliation. I'd thought revealing the truth would feel good, triumphant, like justice. Instead, it felt like I'd burned down a house with everyone still inside. This was supposed to be my revenge, my moment of vindication. But standing there watching my mother cry and my father look lost and my sister's wedding crumble around us, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. You can't win by destroying people you still love, even people who've hurt you. You just end up standing in the ashes, alone, wondering if the fire was worth it. Cameron touched my arm gently. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Across the room, Thomas was trying to salvage something, directing staff, managing guests, keeping the disaster from spreading to the kitchen. And my family stood frozen, looking at me like I was someone they'd never met. Someone successful. Someone powerful. Someone they'd underestimated so completely they couldn't reconcile the reality with their memories. Someone they didn't know how to love. The ballroom had cleared, guests filtering out in uncomfortable clusters, whispering and glancing back. Natalie had fled to the bridal suite, Trevor trailing behind her looking bewildered. Most of my extended family had scattered, probably to call everyone they knew about the Monroe family drama. Only my parents remained, sitting at their table surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned champagne flutes. They looked smaller somehow. Older. Like someone had let the air out of them. I walked over slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Thomas hovered nearby, ready to intervene if things exploded again, but I waved him off. "I should go," I said to the table, to no one in particular. "Sit down." My father's voice was rough, stripped of its usual authority. "Please." I sat. The chair felt foreign, like I was a guest at my own table. We stayed in silence for a long time. Kitchen sounds drifted from the back, the clatter of dishes being washed, staff breaking down the service area. Normal sounds. Life continuing while we sat in the rubble of our family. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom finally asked. Her mascara was streaked, her face naked without its usual perfect composure. "When you opened this place, when you became successful, why did you keep it secret?" I considered lying, considered giving them the easy answer. Instead, I gave them the truth. Because I needed to know I could do it without you, without your approval, without your support. Without you taking credit or telling me I was doing it wrong or treating it like some hobby until I came to my senses and got a real job. Dad flinched like I'd hit him. "We never said—" "You did, Dad. Every time you laughed when I mentioned working here. Every time you changed the subject when I talked about the restaurant industry. Every time you introduced me to someone and made excuses for why I wasn't like Natalie." I paused. "You made it very clear what you thought of my choices. We thought you were struggling, Mom said, and her voice broke. We thought you were too proud to ask for help. We thought, you thought I was failing. And that was easier to believe than asking me what I was actually doing with my life. The words landed between us, heavy and final. My father's hands were shaking. I'd never seen his hands shake before. I'm so sorry, he said, and the words sounded rusty, like he'd never said them before. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to hide from us. Mom reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. We're proud of you. We should have said it years ago. We should have. She couldn't finish. Just sat there with her hand extended, waiting. I looked at her hand. Those perfectly manicured fingers that had patted my head condescendingly for 28 years. Part of me wanted to take it. Part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. I don't know how to do this, I said quietly. I don't know how to be part of this family anymore. Neither do we, Dad admitted. But we want to try. If you'll let us. Cameron had been right when he'd said I was brilliant. But he'd been wrong about something else. Building a business wasn't the hard part. The hard part was building something with people who'd hurt you and believing they could change. There's something you need to understand, I said carefully. I'm not going to explain myself anymore. I'm not going to justify my choices or prove my success or wait for your approval. This is who I am. This is what I've built. And if you want to be part of my life, you need to accept that. We do, Mom said quickly. We accept it. I'm not finished. I looked at both of them. This restaurant? This business? I built it during the hardest years of my life. I built it while taking care of Grandma Rose. I built it while you were telling everyone I was a disappointment. I built it alone because you taught me that asking you for anything meant giving you power over it. Dad's face crumpled. Rose? Your grandmother? Is that why you left school? She had a stroke. Someone had to take care of her. You were too busy, and Natalie was in her sorority. I said it without accusation. Just fact. I used my college fund to pay for her care, and when she died, she left me $50,000 and a note that said, "Build something beautiful." Mom's hand finally reached mine, gripping tight. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it was real. Maybe that was something. Thomas appeared at my elbow. Jasmine? Natalie's asking for you. She's still in the bridal suite. I stood, pulling my hand from Mom's grip. I need to go talk to my sister. Will you come back? Dad asked. He sounded like a child, lost and hoping for rescue. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'll think about it. I found Natalie sitting on the floor of the bridal suite, her wedding dress pooled around her like spilled milk. She'd pulled off her veil and her carefully styled hair was coming undone. Trevor hovered near the door, clearly out of his depth. He can stay, she said when she saw me looking at him. He should probably know what kind of family he married into. I sat down next to her, not caring about my uniform or the expensive carpet. We sat in silence, two sisters who barely knew each other, surrounded by the wreckage of assumptions. I picked this place to humiliate you, she said finally. I'm not going to lie about it. Mom suggested it, and I thought it was perfect. My successful wedding at your little workplace. I wanted you to see what I'd achieved while you were serving tables. The honesty cut deeper than any lie would have. I know. I'm the worst person alive, she said flatly. I just got married in my sister's restaurant, surrounded by her success, and I spent the whole night pitying her. I'm a terrible human being. You're not terrible. You're just young and you listen to the wrong people. She laughed, bitter and sharp. I'm 25. You're only 3 years older and you've built an empire. Don't make excuses for me. I'm not. but I understand what it's like living in mom and dad's expectations. It's suffocating. You did what you needed to do to survive it. Natalie turned to look at me, her eyes red from crying. I should have protected you. When they made jokes about you being a dropout, when they compared us constantly, when they acted like you were an embarrassment, I should have stood up for you. Instead, I just felt relieved it wasn't me. The admission hung between us, true and ugly and somehow freeing. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. About any of it? About Grandma Rose? About the business? About everything? Because you were their golden child, and I didn't want to ruin that for you. You deserve to be celebrated, even if it meant I had to be the failure. She made a sound like a wounded animal. That's messed up, Jazz. That's so messed up. I know. Trevor cleared his throat awkwardly. Should I give you two some privacy? No, Natalie said, reaching for his hand. You should hear this. You should know what you've married into. What kind of family we are. We're the kind of family who spends 3 years mocking someone for their choices and then finds out they were wrong about everything. We're the kind of family who organizes charity as a weapon. Every family has issues, Trevor said carefully. Not like this. Natalie looked at me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for tonight. For everything. For years of being complicit in Mom and Dad's judgment. I'm sorry I chose this venue to make myself feel superior. I'm sorry I didn't know you. Didn't ask. Didn't care enough to see past their narrative. An apology was supposed to feel good. Supposed to be the thing you waited for. The moment of vindication. Instead, it felt heavy. Like gaining something meant losing something else. The armor I'd built. The justified anger. The clarity of knowing who was wrong and who was right. I forgive you, I said, and meant it. But we can't go back to how things were. I don't want to go back, she said quickly. I want to move forward. I want to know you, the real you, not the version Mom and Dad invented. I want to understand how you did this, what drives you, what you care about. She paused. I want to be sisters. Real sisters. It was too much to promise, too much to believe after years of distance and disappointment. But it was something, a starting point. One dinner, I said. Next week. Just us. No parents, no expectations, no performances. We'll talk. She nodded, tears streaming freely now. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. I never gave up on you. I just gave up on the version of you they wanted you to be. Trevor helped Natalie stand, and I stood too. The bridal suite felt smaller, the ivory walls closing in. Outside, I could hear Thomas directing the breakdown, tables being cleared, linens being collected, the efficient dismantling of an event that had gone so wrong. Your wedding, I said suddenly. I ruined your wedding. Natalie shook her head. You didn't ruin it. You revealed it. There's a difference. She smoothed down her dress. Besides, the ceremony was beautiful. The reception was just a dumpster fire? She laughed, and it was real. The most expensive dumpster fire in Chicago. But at least it was memorable. If you're still watching, drop a like and share this because we're almost at the end and the resolution is going to hit different. Comment below, Team Jasmine or Team Parents? 3 months later, I stood in the same ballroom of Sterling Heights, but the energy was completely different. No wedding this time. Just a private dinner party for 12. My parents, Natalie and Trevor, Uncle Paul and Aunt Helen, Cameron and 3 other board members, Thomas and Elena from my wine team. It had been Mom's idea. A redo, she'd called it. A chance to celebrate properly. I'd agreed, but on my terms. No surprises, no performances, no secrets. Everyone at this table knew exactly who I was, and they'd been invited because they wanted to be here. not because they felt obligated. The past 3 months hadn't been easy. My parents and I had started family therapy, awkward, painful sessions where we excavated years of miscommunication and disappointment. They were trying, really trying. Dad had stopped introducing me as his daughter who worked in restaurants and started saying his daughter who owned restaurants. Small difference, huge impact. Mom had taken a cooking class. Not because I owned restaurants, but because she'd spent 40 years never pursuing anything that was just hers. She was terrible at it. Burned everything. Couldn't dice an onion to save her life. But she showed up every week with a stubborn determination I'd never seen before. Natalie and I met for dinner every Tuesday. We talked about real things, her struggles at work, my expansion plans, our childhoods from different perspectives. She'd finally confronted Mom and Dad about their favoritism, and it had been explosive, but necessary. They were learning to see both their daughters as people instead of reflections of their own success or failure. The Manhattan location was opening next month. Cameron's firm had finally convinced me to accept investment capital, and we were planning 2 more locations, Denver and Seattle. The business was thriving. I was thriving. But success felt different now that it wasn't secret. Better in some ways, more exposed in others. Dinner that night was surprisingly easy. Thomas had outdone himself with the menu: dry-aged porterhouse, truffle risotto, roasted vegetables so perfect they could make you cry. The wine was a 2015 Barolo from my personal collection. Dad raised his glass halfway through the meal. "I want to make a toast," he said, and the table fell quiet. "To my daughter Jasmine, who built something extraordinary while we were too busy being idiots to notice." "Richard," Mom said, but she was smiling. "I'm serious. We spent years looking at her and seeing everything she wasn't. Not a college graduate, not a corporate executive, not following the path we'd decided was right. And the whole time, she was building something more impressive than anything Patricia or I ever accomplished." He looked at me directly. "You did it alone because we made you feel like you had to, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry we weren't better, and I'm sorry we can't go back and fix it. But I promise we'll try to be better going forward." It was a good speech, maybe even a great one, and I could see he meant it. "I forgive you," I said, "but I need you to understand something. I didn't build this business to prove you wrong. I built it because I loved it, because Grandma Rose believed in me when nobody else did, because I wanted to create something beautiful in a world that felt ugly and small." "We know," Mom said softly, "and we're grateful you're giving us a chance to see it now." The dinner continued, conversation flowing more naturally than it ever had at family gatherings before. Cameron told embarrassing stories about my early negotiation attempts. Elena explained the wine selection. Natalie asked about expansion plans with genuine interest, not performance. Near the end of the night, Uncle Paul pulled me aside. "I was wrong about you," he said bluntly. "Dead wrong, and I'm sorry." "Thank you." "Your grandmother would be proud," he said. "Rose always said you had steel in your spine. We just couldn't see it because we were too busy looking for something else." After everyone left, I stayed behind with Thomas. We stood in the empty ballroom, looking at the tables we'd set and cleared 1,000 times. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "I'm okay." The revenge I'd imagined, the moment of triumphant revelation, hadn't felt like I'd expected. It hadn't been satisfying in a clean, simple way. Instead, it had been messy and complicated and painful. But it had also been necessary. My family had learned to see me. I'd learned I didn't need them to. And maybe that was the real victory. Not proving them wrong, but learning I could be right all by myself. Sterling Heights, Manhattan opened 6 weeks later to a packed house and rave reviews. My parents flew in for the opening. They wore name tags that said Richard and Patricia Monroe, proud parents. It was corny and embarrassing and made me cry in the walk-in cooler. Natalie brought Trevor and asked if she could work a shift, just to understand what I'd built. She lasted 3 hours before her feet gave out, and she gained a new respect for every server she'd ever met. Cameron's firm invested $12 million in the expansion, and we planned 3 more locations for the following year. I made Forbes's 30 under 30 list. My parents framed the magazine cover. Life wasn't perfect. My family still frustrated me sometimes. They still said the wrong things, still had expectations I couldn't meet, still made assumptions I had to correct. But they were trying, and I was learning to let them try without demanding perfection. Because maybe that's what forgiveness is. Not forgetting the hurt, but making space for people to be better than they were. Not because they deserve it, but because holding on to anger is heavier than letting it go. I built an empire in silence, and then I learned to share it. Both were hard. Both were necessary. Both made me who I am. My name is Jasmine Monroe. I'm 28 years old, worth $35 million, and I own 5 restaurants across the country. I dropped out of college to care for my grandmother. I served tables at my sister's wedding in my own restaurant. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building something so beautiful they can't help but see you clearly for the first time in their lives. If this story hit home, if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, drop a comment below and tell me your story. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Hit that subscribe button for Formidable Revenge channel for more stories about people who fought back, stood up, and refused to stay silent. Like if this resonated with you, share with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Remember, your success doesn't require anyone's permission. Build your empire, live your truth, and never let anyone make you feel small for being exactly who you are. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Stand firm. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to apologize for being extraordinary.